Ruler of the Elves. In LOL, Mercedes awoke from the ice and excitedly left her quarters, hoping to see her subjects alive and well. To her shock, however, all of the elves were still frozen in slumber. Furthermore, Mercedes realized that nearly all of her old strength had faded away because of the curse. She suspected that her awakening was due to the seal of time degrading, meaning that she needed to regain her strength as soon as possible before the Black Mage broke free from the seal. She returned to elf school in order to master the basics, humiliated that she could barely handle the puppetries when she used to train against yetis and wyverns with ease. After becoming stronger, she decided to venture outside the kingdom's borders. Though she dreaded facing the powerful slimes outside, she quickly discovered that they were much weaker than they had been since the curse. Before the curse, making her wonder exactly how much time had passed. Upon arriving in Ellinia, she was perplexed to see a town, as her understanding was that there were no settlements in the Ellen Forest that she remembered. Furthermore, there was no way that such a large town could have been built in just a few years. She decided to speak with the town's residents and recognized that many of them were sylphs, a younger race of fairies. She first spoke with Wing the fairy, who dismissed her as a human. Offended, she told them that she was an elf, but Wing was confused and told her that elves were a race of fairies that had disappeared long ago. When Mercedes was taken aback by the revelation, he told her to confirm it by asking Arwen the fairy. Arwen agreed with Wing and told Mercedes that all the records stated that the elves had vanished hundreds of years ago, though no one knew why or how. As the color drained from Mercedes' face, Arwen grew worried and suggested that she visit Rowan the fairy, who was adept at healing magic. Mercedes wanted to see Rowan and asked her about the elves once more to be very sure, finally accepting the truth after Rowan confirmed that Wing and Arwen were telling the truth. To help calm Mercedes' nerves, Rowan told her to drink a cup of clear tree sap from the talking tree. While Mercedes drank the sap, the talking tree asked what was wrong with her. Mercedes told him that just yesterday everyone knew her name, but nobody knew who she was anymore. The tree unhelpfully told Mercedes that her own pride in her accomplishments didn't automatically make her important, and that there was nothing wrong with being a nobody. As her existential dread set in, Mercedes weakly told him that she had lost her powers and couldn't fight anymore, but the tree told her that there was nothing wrong with not fighting either. When she replied that she had no friends left, the tree grew impatient and snapped at her to make new ones, telling her that she should forget about her problems and live as a normal person. Author's note: the tree is a contender for the most savage character in the game. Imagine roasting the ruler of the elves 3 times in a row. uh, Crass as he was, Mercedes knew that he had a point, and wondered whether she ought to heed his advice and settle down. However, she recalled her people still cursed in eternal slumber, and vowed that even though she had lost her powers and friends, she would never give up. In order to regain her strength and find new allies, she asked the tree whether there were any jobs that she could undertake. The tree told her that Bruce at the Golem Temple was looking for someone to do errands with, though she was miffed at the thought of being a sovereign turned errand girl. She nevertheless decided to seek him out. At the Golem Temple, Bruce hired Mercedes and asked her to first find a package that the golems had stolen from him. After Mercedes returned to him, Bruce realized that the package had been torn open and that one of the items, a dejected green mushroom puppet, had gone missing. He explained that many monsters around Victoria Islands had grown more violent due to such puppets, which exuded noises on a frequency that only monsters could hear, and asked her to return it from the golems. After Mercedes returned the puppet to Bruce, he realized that the golems hadn't exhibited any strange behavior while the puppet was in their possession, which helped him conclude that the frequency of the puppet seemed to only affect green mushrooms. He thanked Mercedes for her help in his research and told her that he would continue investigating the puppets. Sometime later, Bruce reached out and explained that he had told his mentor about her, and his mentor wanted to greet her or meet her. Mercedes went to Perion to meet with Bruce's mentor, Winston, who immediately noticed that she had a peculiar accent and strange ears. He then asked her to collect leaves from dark stumps, as he wanted to compare the leaves to a fossil which he had found. After Mercedes brought him the leaves, Winston compared them against the fossil, but realized that it would be difficult to prove that the species of the fossilized monster was mobile like that of the dark stumps. He wished that was a record of monsters to compare against, but explained that the warriors of Perion cared little about keeping such records. He told her that there was a place in Assyria rumored to have a warp in space-time, which allowed one to travel into the past, though he dismissed it as a myth. Mercedes remembered that she had ordered the creation of a maple picture book during her reign and believed that it was still in LOL. As all the monsters had evolved since the book had been made, she decided that it was useless to her and instead gave it to Winston, who was thrilled to see how detailed it was. He thanked her profusely, explaining that it would change the very course of his research. Before she left, he asked her for a final favor, which was to deliver a vial of Archon's blood to Manji. After delivering the blood, Mercedes was contacted by Bruce, who told her that his colleague, Dr. Betty, had heard good things about her from himself and Winston, and that she wanted to meet Mercedes as well. In Ellinia, Betty asked her to collect Evil Eye cell samples for her research. Mercedes recalled how the Evil Eyes had been disgusting cave dwellers in her time. Betty was confused by her words, and then recalled how Evil Eyes used to live in caves centuries ago, though they had migrated to the forest over time. After collecting the Evil Eye samples, Betty asked her to collect Curse Eye samples, though Mercedes had never heard of Curse Eyes before. She nevertheless collected the samples for Betty. Betty thanked her and began musing aloud whether Evil Eyes or Curse Eyes were older. Mercedes explained that Evil Eyes had to be older, as Curse Eyes hadn't existed centuries ago. She told Betty that Evil Eyes would only leave their caves when food was scarce, and that it had been her responsibility as a sovereign to drive them away from LOL, adding that the Evil Eyes back then were much stronger than they are in present day. Betty then had an epiphany that the Evil Eyes who had first ventured outside their caves likely fed on the forest plants, causing their skin to turn green until they eventually evolved into Curse Eyes. To confirm her hypothesis, Betty asked Mercedes to bring plant cell samples, after which she told Mercedes that she would contact her if she ever needed more help. Author's note. Thankfully, she never does. Mercedes was probably glad to know that she didn't have to spend the rest of her life being a royal intern. Mercedes then heard the voice of Phileas, the Elder of Magic, in her mind. She rushed back to LOL and found that Phileas had been freed from the ice. After reuniting, Mercedes told him about her adventures in Maple World, as well as the fact that centuries had passed. Phileas was puzzled about why the Black Mage's curse hadn't lifted on all of the elves once Mercedes had awoken. Just then, Danika and Astilda, the elders of war and life, awoke and greeted Mercedes. Phileas suggested that with all of the elders awake, they could perform the Rite of Snow, a powerful cleansing ritual, which he hoped would break the Black Mage's curse. When the ritual failed, Phileas concluded that it was because the curse was tied to Mercedes, whose growing strength had allowed the most powerful elves to awaken. He believed that her return to full power would lift the curse on the rest of the elves. However, he also realized that Mercedes' awakening meant that the seal on the Black Mage was weakening, if not already broken. As Phileas began to lose hope, Mercedes insisted that they had not yet lost, and told him they just needed to make new allies in order to gain strength. Phileas then remembered that Mercedes had entrusted the Mistletoe to Athena Pierce, who had evacuated from Leafry before the battle against the Black Mage. He believed that the Mistletoe's power may have shielded Athena from the curse, and that she may have survived the war if she had managed to escape Leafry. Mercedes agreed, but with no leads on where Athena could be, she decided to visit Betty and ask if she knew of Athena. To her surprise, Betty explained that Athena was extremely famous in the Maple world. and that she could be found at the Bowman Instructional School in Hennesis. Mercedes went to see Athena, who couldn't believe her eyes upon seeing her queen. After a heartfelt reunion, Athena told Mercedes how she had crashed in Victoria Island with the other refugees and built Altair Camp. She explained that after the situation had stabilized, she had tried entering LOL many times, but always found the path blocked at the border. Mercedes told her that she had closed the border in order to prevent the curse from spreading, and had never gotten a chance to warn her. Athena then asked about everything that had happened during the final battle, and so Mercedes explained how the heroes had sealed the Black Mage, how his curse on Mercedes had extended to the other elves, and how she was currently trying to awaken them. In turn, she asked Athena about everything that had happened over the past centuries. Athena told Mercedes about how Victoria Island had been completely settled, that Cygnus had become the new empress, and that the Black Wings were trying to revive the Black Mage, and that Von Leon had returned. Author's note: the exact time frame for when Von Leon returns isn't specified, but in terms of game updates, the Lion King's castle was introduced before Mercedes was released, and so I'm assuming that Von Leon likely became active around the same time that Aran and Evan's storylines take place. She also told Mercedes that she had been in contact with Aran, which surprised Mercedes, as humans didn't have long lifespans. Athena explained that Aran had also been frozen for centuries, and that she was traveling around Maple World trying to recover her lost memories. She then asked if they could return to LOL, as she longed to return to her homeland. As they began heading outside, Athena remembered that she had forgotten something and asked Mercedes to wait outside for her. While Mercedes was waiting, Francis approached her, and after confirming that she was indeed Mercedes, began to attack her. Mercedes forced him to retreat just as Athena came out. She brought Mercedes back inside and explained that based on the symbol that Francis was wearing, he was likely a member of the Black Wings. She told Mercedes that she had always suspected that the Black Wings were watching her, but Francis's attack had confirmed her suspicions. She wondered if the Blackwings had made their move because she was trying to take out the Mistletoe. The fact that she still had the Mistletoe after so long surprised Mercedes, but Athena explained that even though she knew that Mercedes had ordered her to safeguard it in order to keep her off the battlefield, she had nevertheless taken the order from her sovereign seriously. Mercedes then wondered why the Blackwings had attacked her and not Athena, to which Athena explained that the Blackwings had a master of disguise whom she believed had been planning to impersonate Mercedes in order to take the Mistletoe from her. Author's note: given how important the Mistletoe seems to be in Mercedes' story, it's strange that it never plays a major role in the overall lore. The game never specifies what kind of treasure it is, but a book called Secret Story, which has a lot of cool extra details about the heroes and commanders, explains that it's a sacred bow imbibed with the power of the elves. We don't really know why the Black Wings were trying to steal it, but I'd wager that they thought it would be used as a power source. Athena then realized that the Black Wings may have been listening in on their conversation, meaning that they knew about the existence of LOL. They immediately rushed over, where they found Black Wing henchmen invading the kingdom. While Athena and Phileas drove them out of the town, Mercedes eliminated all of the enemies at the border. After forcing them to retreat, Phileas told Mercedes that they still didn't know enough about the outside world to form conclusions about the reasons behind the attack. He added that since Athena had other responsibilities outside of LOL, they couldn't rely on her to guide them forever. Athena then returned from eliminating the stragglers and reported that the Black Wings had successfully been driven off, with no injuries on their side. However, she told Mercedes that the Elders were too weak from the ice to hold back a larger invasion in their current state. Mercedes told Athena to keep holding on to the Mistletoe, as LOL was no longer a safe place to keep it. She briefly considered standing guard at the border, but Athena insisted that Mercedes needed to train in order to regain her full strength and free the elves. She suggested that the Cygnus Knights could offer their aid to LOL if Mercedes approached them. Mercedes agreed and visited Cygnus in a rev, and Athena told her that she would write a letter to Cygnus so that she knew to expect Mercedes. Sure enough, Nineheart greeted Mercedes as royalty and led her to the Empress. Cygnus told Mercedes that it was an honor to meet one of the legendary heroes. She explained that she had been trying her best to help Mapleworld, but her inexperience and the fact that the Cygnus Knights were still new made her unsure about how well she was doing. However, she readily agreed to send a detachment of knights to guard LOL and hoped that Mercedes would share her wisdom and guidance as an experienced ruler in exchange. When Mercedes agreed, Cygnus told her that she was glad to have Mercedes' support, as there were few royals with whom she could speak. Author's note: taking into consideration that the other two known monarchs in Mapleworld are the self-obsessed Queen Arida of Ariant and the childish King of Ludibrium, it doesn't come as a surprise that Cygnus has had no one around her that she can talk to about how to rule. After their meeting, Nineheart told Mercedes that he could only spare a few knights, but assured her that they would be sufficient. Mercedes asked Nineheart whether Cygnus would be all right, as the young girl was shouldering a huge burden. Nineheart promised that Cygnus was wise beyond her years, despite her youth, and that he, Shinsu, and the Cygnus Knights were doing everything in their power to support her. Still, Mercedes felt uneasy in her mind about the Black Wings and the return of the Black Mage, wondering whether Cygnus, a frail little girl, would have the strength to lead the people in the event of a full-scale war. Nevertheless, she returned to Hennesis and told Athena Pierce about the successful negotiations. Athena noticed that Mercedes looked unwell and asked whether she was all right. Mercedes confided her doubts about Cygnus, to which Athena told her that Mercedes herself had taught her that a good ruler would go to any lengths to save their people, which was precisely the kind of ruler that Cygnus was. Adding that Cygnus reminded her of Mercedes in a way, Mercedes then returned to LOL, where she met the three knights whom Nineheart had dispatched. One of the knights, Vel, reported that all was well in the kingdom. He added that though there wasn't much to do, he had seen Danika training and was amazed at her fighting prowess, as though she had lifetimes of experience, and asked Mercedes how old Danika was. Mercedes herself had forgotten how old Danika was, but knew that she was older than Athena Pierce at the time that the elves had been frozen. Mercedes went to ask Danika her age, in which Danika answered that she was 240 years old, not counting the time she had spent in the ice. Mercedes reported Danika's age to Vel, who was taken aback, especially when Mercedes joked that Danika was practically a baby. Author's note: I've always wondered whether elves and flora had a similar aging process, especially since they look almost identical. Ilium is 153 at the start of his storyline, and he's probably a high schooler in human terms. Danica is 240 years old and serves as the Elder of War despite her young age. I wonder whether elves and the flora age at around a tenth of a human's aging process, making Ilium around 15 and Danica around 24. After spending more time training, Mercedes felt that she was strong enough to start using some of her more advanced skills. Though she was unable to recall them, she remembered that when she had first become the ruler of the elves, she had undertaken 3 trials from the Great Spirit of the elves. For her third trial, she recalled how she had to beat the Rage Dragon, and how the dragon had almost eliminated her instead. She wondered whether she would have to pass the trials again in order to prove herself worthy to the Great Spirit. At the king's seat, Mercedes played a song called the Sovereign's Appeal on the large harp upon her throne, allowing her to summon the Great Spirit. The Great Spirit greeted Mercedes, who began voicing her doubts about her ability to lead and suggested that a new ruler should lead the elves. The Great Spirit reassured Mercedes that she had done what was best for the elves, as refraining from battle with the Black Mage wouldn't have guaranteed their safety either way. Her spirits lifted. Mercedes then asked whether she would need to pass the trials in order to regain her power, but the Great Spirit told Mercedes that she had already proven herself worthy of elven grace when she had first become queen, and so she restored more of Mercedes' power at no cost. With her new skills, Mercedes continued training earnestly until she was called back to LOL by Estilda, who told Mercedes that LOL's water supply had been poisoned, Though she and the other elders had been trying to purify as much water as they could, they simply couldn't work fast enough, and so Estilda asked Mercedes to check the fountainhead. She apologized for having summoned Mercedes from her training in order to do so, but explained that Phileas was researching the curse, Danika was training for battle, and she herself was simply too old. At the fountainhead, Mercedes found Black Wing henchmen poisoning the water and immediately eliminated them before returning to Estilda. Estilda told her that the Cygnus Knights were doing a good job of protecting the town, but even they couldn't watch everything that was happening around them. She doubted that the Blackwings would try poisoning the water again, but asked Mercedes to tell the Cygnus Knights to watch the fountainhead as well. She also added that it would take time for clean water to flow through LOL, and so asked if Mercedes could bring clean water if she were to encounter any during her travels, mentioning that the Cygnus Knights had said that there was a spring at the highest reaches of Ellinia from which clean water flowed. There, Mercedes found a small stump overflowing with water, which she brought back to LOL. Mercedes then continued her training until Phileas called her back to LOL once again, and explained that an old friend had returned. Upon arriving, Mercedes was pleasantly surprised to see her old friend, Sylvia, a snow-white unicorn. However, she noticed that Sylvia was exhausted and asked if she was hurt. Sylvia replied that she wasn't hurt, but that it had been difficult to find food in Maple World over the past centuries without the help of the elves. Mercedes prepared a special unicorn meal for Sylvia, who was grateful for Mercedes' kindness. However, she explained that she still felt hurt that Mercedes had gone without her to fight the Black Mage, and hoped that they could finally be together again. Mercedes tried to convince Sylvia to wait a bit longer until the Black Mage was defeated for good, but Sylvia protested that she would stay at Mercedes' side no matter what this time. Sometime later, Mercedes received a letter from the Shadow Knight, who had challenged her to a duel in Sleepywood. Furious at the Shadow Knight's audacity in challenging the ruler of the elves, Mercedes went to Sleepywood, intent on putting him in his place. There, the Shadow Knight greeted her and explained that he wanted to test his strength against hers, as the legend stated that Mercedes was a master of the dual bowguns. Mercedes wondered whether the Shadow Knight was affiliated with the Black Wings, but regardless, she swore to win for the honor of the elves and proceeded to defeat him. Author's note: there's a mistake with this quest, as it states that you have to defeat Mu Young instead of Nameless, which is what the Shadow Knight is referred to in other quests. This has led to some people speculating that the Shadow Knight is Mu Young, which is an understandable conclusion, as Lotus possessed Mu Young to fight Phantom in his storyline, giving Mu Young a tie to the Blackwings. However, the death animation for the Shadow Knight shows that he's really just two pandas stacked on top of each other, wearing a robe and a twig. Oh lord. After the Shadow Knights retreated, Mercedes went to ask Athena who he was. Athena was unfamiliar with such a person and asked what he had been wearing. Mercedes described how he had worn a bamboo hat and a cloth that covered his face, explaining that his clothes looked like they were from Mulung. She added that his speech was old, but not from centuries ago, and that he also wore a black robe with a wing symbol on his clothes. Based on her description, Athena concluded that he was likely part of the Black Wings and told Mercedes that she must have scared them. She explained that the Black Wings had agents all over Maple World and asked Mercedes to stay safe in LOL while she herself hunted them down. Mercedes warned Athena that she was overstepping her bounds to suggest that the ruler of the elves hide while her people were in danger. Realizing that she couldn't persuade Mercedes, Athena told her to visit Manji in Perion, as he might know something about the Shadow Knight. When Mercedes described the Shadow Knight to Manji, he told her that he had seen such a man training by fighting wild boars some time ago. In the wild boar lands, Mercedes discovered a tongue twister scroll and brought it back to Athena Pierce. After reading the scroll, Athena learned that the Shadow Knights did indeed belong, or that the Shadow Knight did indeed belong to the Black Wings, but that he had disobeyed their orders and fought Mercedes alone, rather than lead her into an ambush. However, Athena was more worried about the one who had written the letter. as the wording of the letter made it seem as though the person not only knew Mercedes personally, but held a grudge against her. Undeterred, Mercedes continued training and soon regained even more of her old power from the Great Spirit. Soon after, she received a letter from Athena Pierce, who wrote that she had heard of someone who had the power to break the curse on the elves, and that he would be waiting for her in Sleepywood. Mercedes thought it was strange that Athena had written a letter instead of contacting her directly, and noted that the wording of the letter was overly what is that word? Obsequious? Nevertheless, she went to Sleepywood and met a hooded man named Oddish, who told her about the Flame of Revival, which was said to be able to break any curse. Author's note: it's not explicitly mentioned in this quest, but Oddish is actually Hiver in disguise. However, he told Mercedes that he needed to test her strength and asked her to defeat copper drakes. After proving herself, Oddish told her to go into the humid swamp in Sleepywood, where she would find the flame. Mercedes went into the swamp and instead encountered Dargoth, the giant, who told her that there was no flame of revival. Realizing that she had been tricked, Mercedes defeated Dargoth and rushed back to Athena Pierce to warn her that the Blackwings were sending fake letters in her name. After Mercedes explained that she had been ambushed, Athena wondered whether there was an information leak, as the only people who knew about Mercedes' goal to revive the elves were Athena, the elders, and the Cygnus Knights. Athena told Mercedes that she should probably personally speak with the Cygnus Knights and ensure that they were careful with what information they divulged to others. She also suggested that they agree to only speak directly instead of sending letters so that they wouldn't fall for any of the Blackwing schemes. Sometime later, Mercedes was contacted by Lalish, one of the Cygnus Knights dispatched to LOL. He asked Mercedes whether the child she had taken from LOL a few days ago had woken up from the curse. In confusion, Mercedes told him that she had never taken anyone from the town, which in turn confused Lalish, who told her that he had seen her take the child, and that she had told him that she wanted to see if she could break the curse on him. Though he trusted that Mercedes knew what she was doing, he explained that he just wanted to know if the child was all right. Suddenly, he realized that the Blackwings had a master of disguise and feared that he may have been tricked. He asked Mercedes to return to LOL right away, where he apologized to her for failing in his duties. However, Mercedes told him to save his apologies for the child and vowed to get him back. Soon after, she received a letter that instructed her to go to the Vern mine in Edelstein and speak with Letier, the secretary, if she ever wanted to see the child again. Mercedes noted that the letter was signed by someone who remembered Mercedes. When she got to the mine, she immediately threatened Letier to return the child. Letier was unfazed and simply told Mercedes to check the room to the left. Upon entering, she found that the Blackwings had set up an ambush for her, but she easily defeated them all and rescued the child. However, realizing that it was a human child and not an elf, and realized that it was a human child, not an elf, and confronted Letier once again. Letier laughed and said that it was hard to keep track of every child they had kidnapped. But when Mercedes threatened her, Letier said that she would get mad if Mercedes kept her waiting, and so she instructed Mercedes to go into the power plant room on the right and enter the door at the end. Following her directions, Mercedes found herself in Orchid's room, where the wing master was waiting for her. Orchid mocked Mercedes for her one-track mind, claiming that once Mercedes focused on something, she was unable to notice anything else. At first, Mercedes couldn't believe her eyes, but after realizing that it was indeed Orchid, she asked how the wingmaster could still be alive, to which Orchid merely said that she could ask the same of Mercedes. Author's note: I guess that she didn't expect that Orchid and Lotus had survived Phantom's beatdown. Orchid explained that ever since she had heard that Mercedes had been freed from the Black Mage's curse, she had wanted to meet her. Mercedes then realized Orchid was the leader of the Blackwings, which explained why the Blackwings seemed to know so much about her. She asked Orchid what the point of reviving the Black Mage was, to which Orchid began to hint at something that the Black Mage was planning, even in spite of being sealed away. but stopped herself mid-sentence and joked that she had almost given away a secret. The two of them engaged in battle, which Mercedes was barely able to win, causing Orchid to retreat. Author's note: the theatrics are likely just Orchid toying with Mercedes, as she had no intention of reviving the Black Mage. It's also possible that the writers hadn't settled on Orchid's true purpose of founding the Black Wings at this point, which makes her come across as a loyal commander in the exchange. Though Mercedes was exhausted from the fight, she was aware that Orchid hadn't even been at full strength without Lotus by her side. Fearing what could happen if Orchid hadn't been weakened, she then found the elf child in Orchid's room and escaped with him and the human child. She returned the human child to Claudine in Edelstein, believing that Claudine was merely a doctor, and returned back to LOL with the elf child. Mercedes and the elders were amazed that the child Mooney had been freed from the curse by Orchid, and yet another commander had resurfaced. The elders decided to tighten security and asked Mercedes to let Athena Pierce know what had happened, hoping that she could advise them about what to do next. Before she headed out, Mercedes spoke with Mooney to see whether he had recovered from his ordeal. Mooney told her that he couldn't help but feel sad that he was the only child in LOL. With his family and friends still frozen, and with the elders too busy to play with him, he felt especially lonely. Mercedes offered to play with him, but Mooney told her that he couldn't ask her to do that, as she needed to get stronger in order to free the others. Though she could do little else to help him, Mercedes played the music box in the middle of town for him, which helped lift his spirits. Author's note: though she doesn't remember, the music box is the same one that Lucid had made for her, which has the power to give sweet dreams to anyone who listens to the music. She then met with Athena Pierce and told her about her encounter with Orchid, and explained that she was worried about the possibilities of the Black Mage returning. Having faced him once, she knew all too well the terrible power he possessed, and told Athena that the heroes had been lucky not only to have sealed him, but to have escaped with their lives. She feared that there was no guarantee that she could defeat him a second time, especially when she had grown weaker while he was managing to break through the seal of time. She confided to Athena that she was terrified of the Black Mage, but Athena told Mercedes that she wasn't alone, as the explorers, the Cygnus Knights, the Resistance, and the returned heroes all stood with her. Soon after, Nineheart reached out to Mercedes and apologized on behalf of the Cygnus Knights for having allowed Mooney to be kidnapped. Sometime later, Mercedes went to Edelstein to check on the human child, Cutie, and asked Claudine if there was any way that she could help. Claudine told her that she had already done enough to help them, but at Mercedes' insistence, she asked Mercedes to collect Nepenthes seeds in order to create a nutrition pill for Cutie. After Mercedes brought the seeds, Claudine thanked her and noted that both Mercedes' strength and her hatred of the Black Mage made her wonder whether their paths would soon cross again.